Here are 3 true scary stories from Reddit. The links to the stories are in the description below. Enjoy. Number 1. This happened to me when I was 12 and lived in Tbilisi, Georgia. My family lived in an apartment building in a pretty safe part of the town. The only recollection of anything scary happening to me before this incident was that one of our neighbors set another's car on fire in the middle of the night. The police had found out that he set the fire and was arrested shortly afterwards. This story takes place in a local park that doubled as a huge playground. It was always packed with kids and parents, and I was there with my friends. We were playing on a merry-go-round, just talking about video games. Suddenly, I spotted an older man, but didn't think much of it, since a lot of elderly people hang around there, enjoying the sunshine and company. But something about this man just wasn't sitting right with me. I had a weird gut feeling about him. He was making me feel as what I can only describe as unsafe. Then, I became dizzy after being on the merry-go-round for a short while. I was slightly nauseous and had stopped paying attention to him. A short time later, me and my friends decided to leave the park because we were bored. While we were walking, I saw the old man again. He was seated on a bench a little ways in front of us, and his stare was fixated on my best friend. I told my friend, but we didn't think much of it and continued walking. When we got close to the man, he stepped in front of us and said, "Hey kids." Now, my first thought was that he was going to ask us for directions because that happened a lot in that part of town I lived in. But he instead followed it up with, "Would you happen to want some of my goodies?" Being the idiot that I am, instead of walking away, I asked, "What goodies?" The man said nothing and just stared at me. After what seemed an eternity of silence, he said, "Some of these here drugs." He threw open his coat and revealed tiny Ziploc bags filled with powdery substances. My friend quickly said, "No thanks," and we started speed walking home. We all lived in an apartment building on the same block, close to the park. We looked back and saw he was following us, and then he shouted, "What about some candy? I got some candy too." At this point, me and my friends were running and not even looking both ways while darting across the street. Luckily, there were no cars around. Once we got to our block, we felt much safer. Everyone on the block knew us, so if this old man tried anything, we knew we would be safe. I told my parents the moment I got home, and they called the cops. They never found the guy, and we never saw him again. Number 2. I'm 27, but this happened a very long time ago when I was around 5 to 6 years old. I had forgotten all about this incident. When I turned 15, the memories came flooding back. I asked my mom if it was a real memory or just a dream. She confirmed it had happened, or at least the parts I had told her. I've lived in the Netherlands all my life, and as a kid, I lived in a quiet neighborhood with around 100 houses. It was set up in sort of a big circle with only one way for cars to enter and 2 other ways to enter either by foot or by bicycle. Our house was closest to the car entrance, which we all called Front Street. The other side of the circle was called Back Street. Near the back street was a small playground that could easily be viewed from the houses around there. I was allowed to play outside on my own, but I wasn't allowed to go over to the back street and the playground by myself. But on this particular day, I decided to head to the swings alone. Nobody was there when I arrived and figured it was because it was close to dinner time. I was having fun and playing around when suddenly 2 guys, which I think were between the ages of 14 and 16, came up to me. I wasn't scared and figured they were just passing through. That is, until one of them suddenly grabbed me from behind and held a pocket knife to my throat. I was very scared and realized they were taking me deeper inside the playground to an area covered in bushes and out of sight of the houses. The one holding the knife to me said, "Pull down your pants or I will slice your throat." I was terrified, shaking uncontrollably, and too scared to speak. I stood there, unable to move. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, his grip on me suddenly loosened, and I saw why. A woman was out walking down the street in front of the playground. I quickly broke loose and was yelling out to her about what just happened, but I didn't stop running. I ran all the way home without looking back. I didn't tell my mom anything because I was still too scared to speak, and also thought I would get in trouble for going to the back street by myself. So at the time, not telling her seemed the better option. A few months had passed, then one day the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a woman around my mom's age and a boy. He was one of the two boys from that day. They were going door to door selling goodies for a school trip. I didn't say anything. I ran to my mom, leaving the door wide open. I said to her, "That's him," but she had no clue what I was talking about. I forgot I hadn't told her about that day on the playground, so I quickly explained what had happened. She confronted both of them, but of course the boy denied anything that took place. My mom believed me, but couldn't prove anything I had said had happened, and never followed up on it. All in all, I was very lucky for having gotten away, and not realizing until many years later the full horror of the situation I had been in. Number 3. When I was 8 years old, there was this kid in my neighborhood that would torment me and my friends. This went on for quite a while. Then one day his family upped and moved, and my childhood had become a happy one again. This happiness continued all the way until primary school. Up until that point, my best friend had been Jake. He ended up going to a different school, like most of our friends, so we only saw each other on a couple occasions. Over time, we slowly drifted apart and moved on to other friends. So one day, when I was around 13 or 14, I met up with an old friend of mine named Ethan. He had also been friends with Jake. We decided to go to a large park that was located between our houses. We hung out and talked on the swings for a while, but left after a girl started shouting at us, something about us using her swings. We walked through the basketball court to the exit that was closest to Ethan's house. This area was surrounded by thick bushes and trees that make it easy for someone to hide in. So, we had no idea of what was about to happen. We weren't paying much attention to our surroundings as we still had a lot to catch up on. We didn't notice the group of masked people, dressed completely in black, lying in wait, until it was too late. We were quickly surrounded and saw that there stood 6 ominous figures, all armed with kitchen knives. Then one of them spoke. He demanded all of our money and our phones. He said that they would kill us if we refused, or if we tried anything. His voice sounded familiar, and when I got a better look at him, even with the mask, I realized it was Jake. I didn't think he recognized me because he pointed his knife right at me and demanded our money and phones again. At this point, Ethan had also realized who it was, and simultaneously, we both told him who we were. He looked at us for a second, and then pulled off his mask and greeted us. He told me that I hadn't changed much before telling us that we were lucky and to get out of here. We walked away, and as we reached the exit, we turned and saw them running into the bushes. Freaked out, we ran all the way to Ethan's house, and I ended up staying there for a couple more hours. When it came time for me to leave, I ran straight home and completely avoided cutting through the park. I saw him again after that day, but I always avoided him, and over the next few years, I almost never went out on my own again. So, my childhood best friend, who was like a brother to me, almost mugged me. If he hadn't realized who we were, I believe things could have been very different. The people with him seemed pretty ready to stab us, even if we did what they wanted. Jake wasn't exactly a good person to begin with. He had screwed me over and dragged me into bad situations in the past, but this was something I couldn't forgive him for, even though he let us go. I did hear recently that he had turned his life around, but I'm done with him, and I hope I never see him again. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed. Until next time.